All right, we're good. I want to welcome those of you who are here in person, Calvary Baptist Church, for our meeting. What did I do?
The computer.
Oh, okay. There we go. Randy's screensaver is on a shorter cycle than mine. Anyway, I want to welcome everybody who's here in person to our May gathering. I also want to welcome those who are joining us via Facebook. We're glad you're with us. Send us a message, communicate with us, let us know how the presentation is. If you have any questions, Matt, our administrator, will be glad to field those or handle those for you and pass them on, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. So what we're going to talk about today in our Skill Builder is how to access and use community demographics. All right, so let's focus on the access piece of that first. Now, there are a lot of ways that you could get demographic data about the community around your church. Some of those you will pay big bucks for. Some of those, there are some free resources out there, but they can be a challenge to find. What I'm going to talk to you about today, and what I'm going to use as a demonstration, is a free service that the North American Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention offers to all SBC-affiliated churches, associations, and other SBC-affiliated organizations. And so my two favorite things about this, the most charming attributes of this service are A, it's free, and B, it's easy to access. It does not. All it requires is an internet connection, right, and an email address. And so we're going to use it, even though you may find some other resources for demographics that maybe suit you better. I'm going to use this particular one as an example today because it's free for everybody and it's easy to access. You can use it anytime. And so you should see hopefully got an electronic copy or a paper copy of the handout. There may be a few more paper copies back on the counter in the back where the drinks are. So if you need a paper copy of that, grab it. But you'll also find this on our website. If you look under resources where it says Skill Builders, you'll find this PDF document as well as the demographic report that we're going to use as an example as well. So basically what you do is you go to this website, www.nam.net/contact/demographics-request. You go to that address, it's highlighted for you on the handout. Just click on that link, it'll take you to this page. And so you go through and you give them your personal data, who you are, your church name, address, and all that kind of stuff. Give them your organizational information. And then you're going to come down to this window that says report type. All right, so there are two basic types of reports that you can request. The most common one is called a site study. And so what happens with a site study is you pick an address, your church campus, or some other address you want to use as a center point in your community. And then the report's going to be based on that address at different radii, 1 mile, 3 mile, 5 mile, that goes out from that center point. So you're going to get a report on circles, concentric circles around your church campus or whatever you use for a center point. So when you use, say you put in your church physical address, and so the report's going to give you three choices, three concentric circles of different radius lengths from that center point. The most common one, and the one I've got today as a demonstration, is the 1, 3, and 5 mile radius report. So part of the report will be focused on a 1 mile circle around your church campus. Then part will be focused on a 3 mile circle and then a 5 mile circle. Now you can adjust those anywhere between 1 and 15, but you only get 3 choices per report. So if you wanted to, you could do 5, 10, and 15, or however you wanted to do it, depending on what's most relevant to you in terms of population density and how far your church reaches. So you choose in miles. The other option is you can choose in drive time. Click on that and show you what that looks like. So if you choose miles, you just come in and you put in whatever you want your first radius to be, your second and third. Say you want to do a drive time minutes site study instead of a distance. You come in and you click on the drive time, and then you just put however many miles. And again, it's a 1 to 15 scale. So you can say, or however many minutes. You could say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or however you want to do it. Anywhere, 3 choices anywhere between 1 and 15 is what you get. Now, that obviously drive time is estimated. You know, it could be 5 minutes, or if it involves I-35, it could be an hour. So, but it's you know, they're generalizing using drive time averages. But the radius distance, the 1, 3, and 5 miles, will be exactly that. It'll be a 1 mile radius from your church, 3 mile, 5 mile, or whatever the parameters are that you choose. So you go in, you give them your information. You go down to the bottom, click submit, and it'll go to the Center for Missional Research. The other type of study you can do is one called an area study. An area study. And so in an area study, basically you're choosing, the most relevant ones for most churches would be county, zip code, city or town, or metropolitan area. You can do state too, but that's not going to be particularly relevant to you if you're studying your own local mission field. But you can choose, again, you can choose 3 of those. So you may choose 3 different zip codes around your church campus. You may, depending on the size of your city or town, you may choose that, and then maybe some zip code around your city limits, or maybe a county study would be particularly relevant to you where you're situated. So that you can choose 3 options within the area study, and you'll get reports for each one of those 3 options. So again, you just enter your choices there. You go down, hit submit, and you're done as far as the request. That's all that's involved. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to give them a credit card number. You know, it's a free service. And so you choose the site study or the area study. You click submit, and then what happens is they will process your request and run your report, and then they will email back to you a link that for your study. And they say it'll come to you within 72 hours. It's never been more than a day when I've done it. So it's come back within 24 hours. Has that been your experience too, Steve? It's so they get back to you pretty quick. And they send you a link in your email, and then you click on that link, and it will take you to a PDF document for your report. So you can save it, you can share it, you can however you want to do it. It becomes your document to use in a PDF form. And once you've received that, if you want some help interpreting it or understanding how it works, or if you have questions about it, there's an email address there, CMR. CMR stands for Center for Missional Research. CMR Demographics at NAM.net. And if you have questions, or you say you want to set up a consultation about your report, have somebody kind of walk you through it, the person that you'll end up communicating with is Dr. Jeff Farmer. Jeff is a professor at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and he contracts with NAM to operate this database service for Southern Baptists, and this is part of his ministry. But I set up a consultation with him when I ran the sample report, because I wanted him to walk me through it like he would in a church, just so I could sort of highlight some relevant things for you, but also so I would know how it works. And he and I spent about 45 minutes on the phone going through the report, and him, saying, here's some things you need to look for. Here's some key data that's relevant to you. And then he also shared with me some other things, like, for instance, it'll be October of this year, most likely, when the 2020 census data will be loaded into these databases. You can already get some generalized data. They've already apportioned about which states, gain congressional representatives, which laws, so they have general statewide data. But the local detailed data, neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house kind of data, will start showing up in these databases in the fall. He estimated it would be sometime in October before that would be fully loaded in there. So, by the way, that's a great once every 10-year opportunity to get the most recent hard data that is available to you as a church about your community. All right, so Jeff Farmer is able to assist you and communicate with you if you have any questions or just need some consultation interpreting the report. Any question about access before we go on and start talking about using the data? This makes sense? All right. Again, free, easy to access, so I encourage you to take advantage. In fact, I would run a demographic report at least once a year on your church. And you can do request multiple reports if you want to. Say you want to do more than 3 different radius studies, you're going to do 1, 3, and 5, but then you want to do 5, 10, and 15 or whatever, you can go back in and do a second report. You can just do 3 choices per report if you're doing a site study, or three areas per report if you're doing an area study. So you're not limited on the number of reports you can request. Okay? Any questions about that? All right, let's talk a little bit about using the data. Let me jump over here to a sample. So Susan and I are members of New Generations Fellowship in New Braunfels, and as is Matt, who's operating our live stream for us. And so I just decided, okay, I'll just use the physical address of the church campus as a center point. And I went in and through that process I just showed you, requested a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius study. And so the examples we're going to look at today are based on that. And so what you get when you request the report is you'll get a PDF document that I think this one was 68 pages long. All right. So it's broken out. Each report section, there's 6 sections, and each section has subsections based on 1, 3, 5 miles. That's what I requested, was the 1, 3, 5 study. So you'll get the report on, okay, here's what the 1 mile ring around your church looks like. Here's what the 3 mile ring around your church looks like. Here's what the 5 mile ring around your church looks like in each one of the 6 sections of the report. So let's talk about those 6 sections and what kind of data they give you. The first section is something called census profile. You'll notice it says 2010 census profile because that's the last census data that they have fully loaded into the database. And so the census profile is essentially going to tell you what the report area looked like at the last census. All right. So this is the hardest, firmest data that is available here. They actually do a physical count, once every 10 years. And so that's the hardest data. Everything else that's in demographics reports is going to be based on some kind of forecasting model or statistical analysis or surveying data. And so it's going to be based on the most recent census plus other forecasts and statistical models. But the census data itself is the hardest data that you have. If you haven't done it, I would go ahead and run a report for your church so you have the full 2010 census data. And then when the 2020 census data is loaded this fall, run another one. And that way you'll have be able to compare, and you'll have the full set of data there for both census. So the focus here is what your report area looked like in the last census. Some of the key data that you're going to want to look at in this census profile report is, first of all, total population, obviously, how many people are there, total number of households, which is also then going to give you average household size, which can be useful, annual growth rate between the previous census and the most recent one, so it'll give you growth rate between 2000 and 2010. It'll also give you a population breakdown in various ways, by race, by age, by household types, meaning owner-renter, single parent, married empty nesters, and different types of households, and also household sizes. How many households are there 1 mile from your church that have at least 5 people in that household? It'll give you that kind of data. So again, you're going to get a separate one of these census profiles for 1 mile, 3 mile, and 5 mile. And they're concentric circles, remember. So the 3 mile ring includes all the data that's in the 1 mile study. The 5 mile ring includes all the data that's in the 3 and 1 mile studies. All right? So they're concentric and inclusive as you move out from whatever the center point is in your study. So in the census profile, I asked Jeff Farmer, sort of what's something important to key in this particular section of the report. And he said, one thing that most churches will find relevant is to look at the percentage of households with children, in other words, minors, in the study area, and see how it changes as you move out further from the church campus. So, for instance, in New Generations Fellowship, all households with children, this is the 1 mile study, all households with children, 49.1%. That's pretty high. It means that almost half of the households within 1 mile of that church campus have minors living in that household at the 2010 census. We'll get into some forecasting in more recent data in a minute, but basically at that point, over almost half of the households within the 1 mile radius had children, had minors. You go out to the 3 mile ring. Notice how it changes. It goes to 41.7%, right? It goes down a little bit. And then you go out to the 5 mile ring, and it goes down to 37.5%. So from 49.1 to 37.5, the further you go out from the church campus, the lower the percentage of households that have children in them. So how might that inform your ministry? Well, say you're doing a VBS this summer, and you've got an advertising budget. Where are you going to spend your advertising budget? You're going to do mailers, or you're going to do, you're going to go walk neighborhoods and knock on doors, or leave, door hanger flyers or something. Where are you going to do it? Well, you're going to do it in that inner circle, that 1 mile from the church, because that's where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. Now, maybe you can afford to do a saturation mailer to the whole area, but most churches sort of have to pick and choose where they're going to spend their advertising dollars or their outreach dollars. And this will help you figure out, okay, we're doing something that involves reaching kids that we're not already reaching. Where do we need to spend our time connecting with the community? So that's one way that this data can be helpful to you. Any questions about that? All right. The next type of report is called a ACS population summary. ACS population summary. Excuse me. The ACS population summary is based on something. The ACS stands for American Community Survey, and it's one of the many surveys and estimates and things that are done between census years. All right. So they're going to do some sampling, some surveying. They're going to take a statistical sample, and they're going to analyze that, and then they're going to extrapolate from that some forecasts and things. Okay, here are the trends, kind of thing. Now remember, this is based on census data, but it's also involving other things that are more of a surveying and statistical modeling kind of approach. And so, the advantage here is it's going to have some more recent estimates. 2010 was a long time ago for as far as hard data. So this is going to have some more recent estimates. This particular American Community Survey was done between 2015 and 2019. So it's going to have more recent data for you and your church. The other thing to understand about this survey is that it's as you see here, MOE means margin of error, and reliability is represented by a 3-bar scale. So 3 bars means high reliability. And what that means is they got a lot of responses, enough so that their margin of error is down fairly small. In other words, high statistical probability indicated by that, because they got a lot of responses. 2 bars is intermediate. Somewhat, high, but not. They didn't quite get enough responses to be able to say with the highest level of statistical certainty. And then 1 bar is lower. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means the margin of error is much wider because they got back fewer numbers of sample respondents in that particular part of the survey. So you do want to pay attention to margin of error and reliability in this particular report. So in this ACS population summary, some things to look for. School-age population in your study area, broken down by grade categories. For instance, 1 through 4, 5 to 8, 9 through 12. So you're breaking down the population in your study area, again, at 1 mile, 3 mile, 5 miles. So you'll get a number for each one of those circles. But how many, first through fourth graders live within 1 mile of our church campus? This report will give you a good estimate of that. Senior adult population. How many seniors? How many folks that are in their golden years, or live within a mile or 3 miles or whatever of our campus. It'll let you know what language groups are there and how, and an estimate of how many there are that language is their primary language in the home. It will tell you how many households in the study area have internet access within the home. What's the average commute time, average travel time to work for folks that live within this particular area? What's the percentage of adult females that are in the labor force in this particular area, which could inform some ministries that your church does, say for after-school programs, things like that. Poverty status. How do the folks in this study area, how does their household income compare to the poverty level, and so forth? So it might give you some clues about some households, or how many people in your area are maybe dealing with some financial stress, but just because of their household income. So one example of how to use this data, and I thought this was interesting, is to look at and find out how many households have no internet access in the home in this particular area. Now that's become even more relevant in the last year and a half, as everything churches do has gone to online. For a long time there, it was exclusively online, right? Now, it doesn't, if they don't have internet access in their home through broadband or satellite or something, it doesn't mean they don't have any internet access at all. It may mean that they're just reduced to using the data plan on their smartphone, or they may have internet access someplace else, where they work and so forth. But think about how this might inform the types of ministries you do online, and how you format your website and so forth to make sure that it's accessible in an easy way for folks that are accessing it by smartphone and so forth. So when I looked at the stats for New Generation Fellowship, I found that in the, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. This is in the 1 mile ring. 5.9% of households have no internet access in the home. All right, and that gets 2 bars, so it's medium in terms of accuracy and reliability and so forth. But I thought 5.9%. That doesn't seem extremely high. I wonder what happens the further away you go from the church campus. All right, well, look what happens when you get out to the 3 mile ring. I apparently went to the wrong page. Oh, here we go. It jumps to 9.7%. All right. All right. And then look what happens when you jump out to the outskirts of this study, the 5 mile ring. Let's see. Jumps up to almost 12%, 11.9%. So, if you're designing your church's ministry approach to using your website, using an app, using whatever you're doing online, you need to realize that over 10% of the households that live within 5 miles of you aren't going to be accessing that in their home. So what other kind of advertising strategies might we need to adopt as a church to connect with those folks? How do we make sure that what we have online is user friendly on a smartphone? Because that may be the only way that they're going to be able to connect with it, and so that may have some bearing on how you design those things and what they look like. So I was frankly surprised that almost 12% of the people of the households within 5 miles of our church did not have any kind of hard internet access into their homes.
Higher in the 3 to 5 mile because you're taking the lower data.
Exactly.
So it's probably 3 miles out. It's probably 20%.
Probably 15 to 20. Yeah, because it includes that inner ring that was only 4-point-something%.
Skews it a little bit.
Exactly. So if you took out the 3 and 1 mile slice and you just did that 5 mile ring around the church, that between 3 and 5 miles around the church, as Stephen was saying, it would probably be more like 15-20%. That's a lot of people that can't access what you're trying to put in front of them via your online ministry. So anyway, that's just one way that might help you think about what your online approach is going to look like. All right, the third section, the next section in your report is called the demographic and income profile. Demographic and income profile. And what this report does is it focuses on data from the last census. Again, everything's still referring back to 2010, but it gives you 10 and 15-year forecasts, all right, of what the trends are. Again, based on surveying and statistical modeling, what are the trends happening there? So in the demographic and income profile, some key data that you want to look at are population change forecast, obviously. How's the population changing? Household income groupings. It'll give you ranges of income and tell you how many households in your study area fall in that range. It will give you age groupings, right? So how many, 10 to 15-year-olds or whatever live in that particular area. It'll give you race and ethnicity groupings. And the other thing I like about this particular study is it gives you some real cool charts that you can use and you can pull out of here and use them for presentations in your church and so forth. So annual rate of percentage, population growth, households, families, population by age. It'll tell you how it breaks down. It'll give you household income, a pie chart of different income ranges, and then it'll give you a chart of population by race. Now, one thing about race and ethnicity studies that you need to be careful about is Hispanic is not a race, okay? Right? So Hispanic cuts across all racial categories. You can be a Hispanic from Mexico, you can be a Hispanic from the Dominican Republic, you can be Hispanic from Spain, you can be Hispanic, so it cuts across. It's not an ethnic or a racial number, but it's often a very relevant number to a lot of the churches in our area. How many households or how many people are there in our community that would consider themselves Hispanic in some sense? It doesn't necessarily mean they speak Spanish, they might, but it means they have some kind of Hispanic culture background. So as I was looking at the data for New Generations Fellowship, I noticed that I was looking at the people groups and how they change as you go out from that center point. So at the 1 mile study, the 2010 census showed 29.4 people percent households that considered themselves Hispanic in some sense. All right, that was 2010. The forecasting out to 2025 has that number at 34.9. All right, so over 5% increase. Now, when the 2020 census data comes out, we'll have a better idea of whether those forecasts were accurate. But in any case, it's certainly showing an increase in the number of Hispanics. All right, so let's go out to the next level, the 3 mile level. And you'll see that in the 2010 census, it was 35.4. It's forecasted to be 48.4 in 2025. All right, let's go out one more level to the 5 mile range. 2010 census, 37.2%, 50.2%. So what does that tell New Generations Fellowship? All right. Well, New Generations Fellowship is already a bilingual congregation. But it tells them that the folks in our missionary, our local mission field that consider themselves Hispanic are on the increase rapidly. And we need to think about what does that mean in terms of children's ministries? What does it mean in terms of language ministries? What does it mean in terms of outreach events that the church might do that might appeal to a particular kind of culture? They probably needs to have some kind of Hispanic flavor to it to be, and maybe connecting on important days to that community. So it can inform a lot of ways in which your church is ministering or is planning to minister in the future. All right. So that's just one example of looking at the trends about population in your area. All right. The next report is one that's called the housing profile. The housing profile. And what the housing profile is, let me run down to. There we go. What the housing profile does, it's also gives you a 10 and 15-year forecast. And so it's going to start with data from the last census, and then it's going to give you a forecast for 2020, which is obviously already in the past for us, but based on the 2010 census was a forecast. And then it's going to give you that 2025 forecast as well. So census data plus 10 years and census data plus 15 years. And so in the housing profile, the focus here is on key data like total housing units and the breakdown of those units. How many of them are owner lived in houses or homes? How many of them are renter lived in? How many of them are vacant? Now, if you remember back in 2010, we were just coming out of that Great Recession, and housing vacancy tended to be higher than what we were used to because of foreclosures and other things. Maybe not so much in our area as in other parts of the country, but still it certainly impacted the Austin, San Antonio region. But one thing to notice, or one thing to pay attention to is if you have a lot of vacancies, you have a fairly high percentage of vacancies. In the area that this survey was done in, New Braunfels, we have a lot of seasonal vacancies in New Braunfels because people own vacation houses, or they own, Vrbo rental things that or Airbnb or whatever, and then those places may be sitting vacant at some particular point of the year, but they may not otherwise. So vacancy can indicate a lot of things. But it's interesting to know the breakdown between owners and renters in your particular ministry area, because that could certainly inform some of the ministries that your church offers based on what the needs of people are. So it's going to give you housing units. It's going to give you some breakdown of housing unit values. How many homes are there in your study area that fall within this range of estimated value? It's going to tell you some things like percentage of home owners that have a mortgage, and percentage of homeowners that own the house free and clear. So it's going to how many mortgage holders you may have in a particular part of your mission field may inform some ministries that your church offers in terms of financial management, or how to manage your finances, how to get out of debt, that kind of thing. So a way that you could use the data in the housing profile is you can look at the percentage of owner-occupied housing units and how that's projected to change. Is home ownership increasing in your area, or is it decreasing? So when I looked at New Generations Fellowship at the 1 mile ring, the 2010 census showed 76.8% of the housing units were owner occupied, right? So roughly 3/4. Their forecast was that goes up to 83.9 in 2020 and 84.1 in 2025. So their forecast was it's on the upswing. We'll find out when the 2020 census data comes out how accurate their forecast was. But basically they're expecting home ownership. More people are going to be moving into this area who own their homes as opposed to the percentage of renters growing. Let's see. Let's go down to page 45, and this will show us at the 3 mile ring, home ownership 65.4%, forecasted 2025 71.7%. So growing at the 3 mile radius as well, and then at the 5 mile radius, 59.2 to 63.7. A little bit of change there. But another thing to notice here is the further you go out from the church campus, the lower the percentage of home ownership becomes, and the higher the percentage of renting becomes. Again, that's going to dovetail with some other socioeconomic factors that you'll see in the reports. But again, that could tell you some things about the lifestyles and the folks who are in your community. It can also tell you some things about how long are folks likely to be in that community. If they're renters, their tenure is probably going to be on average shorter than if they're homeowners. So again, gives you some indication of the type of folks you have in your mission field. All right, so the next report is called Tapestry Segmentation Area Profile. Tapestry Segmentation area profile. Now that's a mouthful. Here's what that means. What that means is we've seen a lot of numbers, a lot of data, that are useful. What this is an effort to interpret the data and group people into lifestyle categories, socioeconomic and lifestyle groups. How do people live? What's the typical level of education? What's how much debt are they carrying? How many children do they have? So what kind of jobs, what kind of professions are they in? That kind of thing. And so this will help you begin to interpret. Okay, we know how many people are that category, but what kind of people are they? How do they think? What do they do? What do they value? How do they function as a household? So in the Tapestry segmentation, it'll give you that information. Now, here's something important to notice. For instance, at the 1 mile radius in the New Generation study, the number one Tapestry group is called Boomburbs. Boomburbs. The number 2 Tapestry group is up-and-coming families. Boomburbs, 46.4, up-and-coming, 29.73, cumulatively 75.7%. In other words, 3/4 of the people, of the households that live within a mile of the church campus fall within these 2 categories. And you might say, well, that's neat, but I have no idea what a boombird is. What does that mean? Up and coming, what does that mean? All right, so you take your little handy little mouse, and in your PDF report, you click on Boomburbs. Hopefully by the miracle of the internet, there we go. It's going to give you an explanation of who these people are, right? Now, and it estimates that in the United States, there are 2 million, a little over 2 million households that make up this particular lifestyle group. But we know that almost half of the people that live within a mile of the church campus in this study are in this group. So what about them? What are some things we need to know about them? They tend to live in suburban areas where on periphery of large metropolitan areas. Certainly is true here. They tend to be young families that are married with children. The home ownership is 84% in this group. In other words, 84% of them are owners rather than renters. Medium home values can be skewed toward those parts of the country where it's really high. But they're well educated. They're young professionals. 55% of the adults in this group are college graduates. That's pretty high. All right. So it's going to tell you something about them. All right. Then go back to your report. And unfortunately, for some unknown reason, when you do that, it goes back to page 1. So bear with me. Go back to page 50. All right. So then you've got the second group is that up-and-coming families group. All right. You find out some things about them as well. Almost 3 million households in the U.S. fall within this category. They tend to live in the suburban periphery. Housing affordability is a bigger issue for them than it is for the Bloomberg folks. 67% have some college education or degrees. They tend to, most households have 2 or more earners in those households, right? So again, just it's going to give you some lifestyle kind of information about those folks. So as I looked at the New Generations report, bear with me, I'm going to do this little dance one more time. I looked at the New Generations report, found that in the 1 mile, of course, we saw that Bloombergs were by far almost half, followed by up-and-coming families at almost a third. All right? But when we go to the next level, look what happens. It's going to be in here somewhere. I just know it. There we go. We go to the next level. Boomberg, so we go from 1 mile radius to 3. Boomberg drops down to 6. Right? They're only 6-point-something% of that population, but up-and-coming families moves up to first. They're over a third of the population in that area, followed by what's called Middleburg. But if you remember in the 1 mile circle, Boombergs and up-and-coming families together made up 75%. Here are the top 2 categories only make up, cumulatively 38. 0.8%. So you see there are a lot more groups that show up in that 3-mile study. The same thing happens in the 5-mile study. It becomes more diverse the further out you get. So up-and-coming families is still number one, just like in the 3-mile ring. At the 5-mile level, they're still number one, but they're only 17.7%. Middleburg is still number two, but they fall down to 14.1%. And you put the two of those groups together, and they don't even make up a third of that study area, 31.8%. So again, as Stephen pointed out, this includes that 1-mile area that was so heavily the Bloomberg folks. So it means even more. The cumulative percentage grows, obviously, but if you looked at just the slice from 1 to 3 miles or from 3 to 5 miles, there are going to even be fewer Bloomberg type folks in those areas than there are in the cumulative total. So the bottom line is, across the 1, 3, and 5 mile ring studies, though the Bloomberg folks are the ones that are closest to the campus, across the whole study area, up and coming families is the common denominator. That's the most likely household you'll encounter in the whole study area. But just in that 1 mile slice, though, it's a little bit different, living right close to the church campus. So anyway, again, it could inform some different types of ministries you do related to children or adults, and what kind of outreach you do, when you're going to expect people to be at home, because if you've got a high percentage of 2-earner families, you're going to have to be careful about if you're going to try to reach them at their front door. You're going to have to really pick your spots, and they may not be glad to see you because they're so busy. They don't want anybody bothering them on Saturday. But a lot of ways that this can inform how you plan the ministries of your church. All right, one last report section, and this has to do with the number of cars that are driving around your particular area, traffic count profile. Now, the previous 5 sections all had the 3 subsections, the 1, 3, and 5 mile, and so forth. This one just comes as a one-pager. They just take the whole thing together, and they start with the measuring points that are closest to your center point and works their way out. So you'll get on this report up to 30. It may not include 30 because there may not be 30 actual counting points that have been recorded from the church campus. For instance, with it didn't number them here, but it was about 20 or so of counting points that showed up on this report for New Generations. But what it will tell you is at some point in time, somebody or some electronic gizmo that somebody set up at that particular point counted the number of cars, 2-way traffic, so both ways all day. So there's obviously a lot of double counting, right, for commuters. They're going one way in the morning and the other way in the evening. But how many automobiles pass in front of that particular point on that particular road in a given week? So, for instance, probably the one that's most relevant to New Generations is the second one on the line here. This is on Farm to Market FM 725, which is what Seguin Avenue becomes as it moves out of New Braunfels toward McQueen. And so at that particular point, which is actually 0.15 miles from the church campus. So, that's not very far, almost, a good long golf shot from the campus. There were 20,000 cars. In 2019, when this count was taken, there were 20,000 cars that passed that point on a given day. All right? And go through the report, and it'll tell you where the count was taken, what road the count was taken on, how far the counting point was from your center point, your church campus, where the nearest intersection is, and how far the counting point was from that intersection, and the year the count was taken. That particular count was taken in 2019, so that's still fairly relevant data. Some of the counts on here are like from 2004, 2005. I don't know how relevant that is. One thing that I noticed as I looked at the traffic count profile for New Generations was that obviously the closer you get to I-35, which is about 2 miles from straight shot, 2 miles down 725 to I-35, the closer you got to I-35, obviously the higher the car counts went. You get to I-35, and I think the count was 80,000, which is probably double that by now, based on when the count was taken. So if New Generations was going to invest, say, in some signage, directional signage or billboards or everything, the main thing is help people find you from I-35, because that's where most people are going to be coming from. Or even if they're not coming from there, in their minds, if you say, okay, give me directions from I-35, and you give them the directions, they'll know how to interpret that for wherever they live or wherever they're coming from. Because that's obviously the big reference point in that particular point is anything that intersects with I-35. So if you're going to spend some money at New Generations on signage or a billboard or something like that, it better be getting in front of the eyeballs of the people who are using I-35 on a regular basis. All right? Well, that was a lot of stuff I just dumped on you there. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that New Generation is a bilingual ministry.
Yes.
What does that mean?
They have services in Spanish and in English, and everything they do, they take into consideration both Spanish speakers and English speakers. At one time, they were doing an interpreted service, English interpreted to Spanish, or Spanish interpreted to English. They decided to do with that because it wasn't effective. It irritated everybody instead of reaching one group. So they said the best thing for us to do is go to Spanish and all English, and that's basically the two congregations that make up New Generations Fellowship. Three guesses as to which service I go to.
There's one pastor or two pastors?
One pastor, Pastor Joe Tostada, who is bilingual, but he also uses a teaching team of some Spanish-speaking preachers and some English-speaking preachers. I preach in the English service because my Espanol is muy poquito. But I am trying to learn. I do my Spanish lesson every day on Duolingo. But obviously, anything that New Generations does is going to have to take into account that almost half of the people, well, actually at 5 miles, over half of the people in their local mission field consider themselves in some sense Hispanic. Obviously, a lot of those folks are going to be Spanish speakers first, but a lot of them are going to be English speakers, but still Hispanic culture folks. And that's an important thing to understand about your mission field. Stephen.
Can I just tell you 2 ways we use this?
Yes, please.
Because when we were going to hire him, we didn't know we were going to hire him.
You can give him a name if you want to.
At the time, he's our next generation pastor, Derek, but we hired him as our children's pastor. And a lot of people had the image that our community was a retirement community, and because it was that for many years. Bastrop, Texas was a retirement. But when I ran the report and showed them the number of children and the number of the projected growth, that's when we made the decision to hire a children. So that really affected us. And then recently, some of our women's ministry, they were struggling because they were not reaching younger women. And so I ran this report and showed them how many work. And that was the problem. They were doing stuff in the daytime and in a way that was not connecting with them. So that they're changing their entire approach to women's ministry at the church because they did not realize it's like 80%.
They're doing women's ministry at a time that women couldn't come.
Women couldn't come, or just right after work, you know what I mean? When they're, and so
and planning things for after work slot.
Right.
Look at the average commute times.
Correct, exactly. So I ran the report just for them so they could see that, and that's affecting some of their decisions.
So some concrete ways that demographics can inform and help you make better decisions on spending your personnel dollars, planning ministries, and so forth. All right, anything else? Yeah, Matt.
I've got one question online from Jeffrey Latham from Westover Baptist. He says, how many of those folks in those neighborhoods near the church are different denominations? Do we know that information, or do you have a guesstimate?
This data doesn't tell you that. There are some services that you can access that will give you quasi-accurate information about that based on some things. But you could probably look at the percentage of different people groups that show up in your survey, and then go to some other data that tell you, okay, what percentage of Hispanic households typically consider themselves Catholic, which consider themselves Protestant, which consider themselves other or none or whatever. And so you could make some estimates that way, but you would have to use some resources outside of this data to get there.
Well, if it shows how many are cowboys riding bulls, Jeff will really.
Yeah. I don't know if do you ever ride bulls is on the census questionnaire,
Sorry, Jeff.
but again, there probably is some data out there that you could use to make some estimates. Right? Yeah, Matt.
This one's for me.
Okay, good.
Given the fact that our church is very far out in the rural area of New Braunfels, our data is not going to be the same as a church that's smack in the middle of a city, right?
Right.
I just noticed when you were speaking, you were saying like it's going up and it's going up the further you go out. But if you're in the middle of a city, your 1 mile radius might be more skewed one way versus the other.
That's correct. And for new generations, the further you go out in terms, 1, 3 to 5 miles moving west, the more dense the population becomes.
Right.
And most of the population lives to the west and the south of New Generation's campus. Yeah, so you have to be aware of that as well.
It'll be really interesting to see in the next 5 years because we have a whole bunch of apartment complexes going up
Yes.
around our church.
Absolutely.
So it's going to completely change.
And that won't be reflected in the 2020 census data, but it will be reflected in future surveys and statistical models that project growth and so forth.
Right.
All right, we better wind it up. I'll be happy to answer any questions after we dismiss, if I can. If not, we'll find somebody who knows the answer. But I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you will take this resource that's provided to you as Southern Baptist and make your best use of it as a local church. As Stephen has pointed out, this stuff can help you make much better decisions and about how you spend your dollars, about how you set priorities for ministry, about how you schedule things, and who it is you're trying to reach in your local community. So use it to your best advantage, and you won't find a better price. All right, so make sure you take advantage of it. All right, anything else before we dismiss? All right, let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you for providing these tools of demographics. Thank you for people like Jeff Farmer and others who make these things available and usable for us. Lord, I pray that you'll help these church leaders and the churches that they represent, Lord, help them to make good, informed decisions. Lord, we know that all truth is your truth. And so Lord, help us to know the truth about who's living in our local mission fields and what they're doing and what kind of things they're dealing with as families and as households, and how we can do a better job connecting with them and building bridges over which we can take into their lives the gospel of Jesus Christ. Lord, so help us to make good use of this and show us how to do that. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for you folks on Facebook for joining us.